The silence that followed my father's words was deafening. "You've always been a disappointment, Sarah," he announced, carving knife suspended midair over the Thanksgiving turkey. 20 pairs of eyes locked on me, aunts, uncles, cousins, all frozen in that uniquely American tableau of holiday discomfort. I'd been bracing for some version of this moment my entire life, but nothing prepares you for public execution over cranberry sauce and sweet potato casserole. Then the doorbell rang. My father, always the perfect host to everyone except his own daughter, plastered on his signature charm the client smile and went to answer it. I heard the warm welcome, the boisterous introductions, and then a familiar voice that made my blood run cold. It was Gabriel Chen, my boss, the CEO of Horizon Tech, and the man who had just acquired my father's failing company without him knowing who was really behind the deal. He wasn't supposed to arrive for another hour. The universe, it seemed, had a flair for dramatic timing. I watched my father's face transform as Gabriel walked into the dining room, looked directly at me, and said 6 words that changed everything. "There's my star executive! Happy Thanksgiving, Sarah!" Growing up in suburban Connecticut as the only daughter of Richard and Margaret Walsh meant living in the shadow of expectations I could never quite meet. My father built Walsh Engineering from nothing, transforming it into a respected regional firm through sheer force of will and what he called good old-fashioned American ingenuity. Every dinner conversation revolved around the business, the clients, the contracts, and eventually my brother Kevin's grooming to take over the family legacy. I was smart, maybe too smart for my own good. While Kevin struggled with basic calculus, I was designing my first algorithm at 14. But Dad never noticed. "Engineering isn't really for girls, Pumpkin," he'd say, patting my head. "You should focus on something more suitable." This from a man whose company logo featured a blueprint and the words, "Building Tomorrow Today." When I brought home perfect SAT scores, my father nodded absently. When Kevin brought home a C+ in physics, Dad took him fishing to celebrate trying his best. During my high school graduation, where I was valedictorian, Dad checked his phone throughout my speech. Later, I overheard him telling Uncle Frank, "Sarah's book smart, but Kevin's got real-world smarts. That's what counts in business." College was my escape. MIT offered a full scholarship, and I threw myself into computer science and artificial intelligence. Dad called it my hobby phase and asked when I was planning to study something practical. When I introduced him to my senior project, an efficiency algorithm that optimized resource allocation, he glanced at it for 30 seconds before asking if I'd met any nice boys at school. After graduation, I turned down job offers from Silicon Valley to work at a small tech startup in Boston. Dad couldn't understand why I'd choose an unstable job over the security of coming home to work for Walsh Engineering. What he really couldn't understand was why I'd choose freedom over his control. The startup grew, and so did my reputation. By 30, I was heading the R&D department at Horizon Tech, developing algorithms that revolutionized supply chain management. Meanwhile, Walsh Engineering was struggling, losing contracts to more innovative competitors. Kevin, now CFO under Dad, couldn't stem the bleeding. The company my father had built was dying, and he was too proud to change course. That's when I created Project Phoenix, an algorithm specifically designed to optimize manufacturing processes for mid-sized engineering firms. It took me 18 months of nights and weekends, fueled by a complex cocktail of resentment and, despite everything, love. I wanted to save Walsh Engineering, but I couldn't bear to hand my work directly to my father, knowing he'd dismiss it as he had everything else I'd ever created. So I pitched it to Gabriel, my boss, with a condition. Horizon would acquire Walsh Engineering, implement my algorithm, and save the jobs of the 87 employees who depended on the company. What I didn't tell Gabriel was that I'd structured the deal to leave my father as a figurehead with a generous salary but no real power. The algorithm would be the real boss, my creation running the company my father never thought I was worthy to touch. The acquisition was set to be announced the Monday after Thanksgiving. Dad had no idea who was behind it, or that I even worked at Horizon. He'd been told only that a major tech firm was interested in exploring synergies. For the first time in decades, he'd invited me home for Thanksgiving, probably hoping I'd finally found a suitable husband to parade before the extended family. Instead, I was bringing the secret that would either heal our relationship or destroy it completely. The grand gesture, saving his company, was my olive branch. But as I packed for the trip home, I wondered if any gesture could ever be grand enough to make Richard Walsh see his daughter clearly. Thanksgiving at the Walsh household was always a production. Mom spent weeks planning the menu, Dad selected wines with military precision, and the house transformed into a showcase of upper-middle-class New England prosperity. This year was no different, except that I arrived with a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with anticipatory indigestion. "Sarah, you made it!" Mom embraced me at the door, the scent of her Chanel No. 5 mixing with roasting turkey. "You look professional." It wasn't quite approval in her voice, but close enough. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a cashmere sweater and pearls that would meet Mom's standards while concealing the woman who now regularly closed million-dollar deals. Dad appeared from his study, martini already in hand. "There she is," he said, giving me a perfunctory hug. "The prodigal daughter returns." His eyes swept over me, searching for signs of failure, finding none, and seeming vaguely disappointed by the fact. "Hi, Dad. Happy Thanksgiving." Kevin arrived with his wife Jennifer and their 2 picture-perfect children. "Aunt Sarah," they squealed, hugging my legs. I'd sent them coding games for their birthdays, gifts that Kevin had described as a bit advanced, with that familiar Welsh tone that really meant inappropriate. "Still working at that tech place?" Dad asked as I helped Mom in the kitchen, his question floating over the island counter. "Horizon Tech, yes, still there." Thought those startups burned out quick. What do you do there again? Something with computers?" I diced celery with unnecessary force. "I'm the Executive Vice President of Innovation and Product Development." He chuckled. "Fancy title, but what do you actually do?" 5 years at MIT, 3 patents, and an algorithm that would save his company, reduced to something with computers. I bit my tongue. "I solve problems, Dad. Complex ones." By 4 o'clock, the house was full. Mom's sisters and their husbands, Dad's brother Frank and his latest girlfriend, Kevin's in-laws, and a few neighbors who'd been promoted to holiday status. I circulated with practiced ease, deflecting questions about my love life with humor and vague references to being married to my work. During appetizers, Dad cornered me by the fireplace. "Kevin tells me Walsh Engineering might have a buyer." His voice was casual, but his eyes were sharp. "You hear anything about that in your tech circles?" "I might have," I said carefully. "Would that be such a bad thing? I heard things have been challenging." His face hardened. "Walsh Engineering isn't for sale. We're restructuring. Kevin has some good ideas." "Dad," I interrupted, "the company's losing money. Your biggest clients are moving to competitors. Maybe it's time to consider—" "Consider what? Giving up? That's not how I built this family, Sarah. But I wouldn't expect you to understand loyalty or legacy." He drained his martini. "Some of us are builders. Others just play with computers." I felt the familiar heat rising in my cheeks, that childhood blend of shame and rage. My playing paid for Mom's hip surgery last year. The words escaped before I could stop them. His eyes widened briefly. He hadn't known, I realized. Mom had kept my financial help a secret. Nobody asked you to. No, nobody ever asks me for anything except to be different than I am. I lowered my voice as Aunt Patricia passed by. I'm successful, Dad. Very successful. Why isn't that enough? The dinner bell saved him from answering. We processed to the dining room, taking our assigned seats. Dad at the head, Mom at the foot, Kevin and family to his right, me alone to his left. The tradition of Walsh family hierarchy preserved in seating arrangements. Dinner progressed with the usual rhythms. Dad carved the turkey, making jokes about giving the choicest pieces to his favorite family members, none of which came my way. Wine flowed, compliments to the chef were exchanged, and discussions about politics were carefully navigated around the more conservative relatives. Then Kevin, halfway through his second helping, cleared his throat. So, Dad and I have some exciting news. He looked at our father with puppyish approval-seeking. Walsh Engineering is launching a new digital initiative. We're calling it the future of Walsh. Dad beamed. Kevin's idea, going to revolutionize how we do business. Digital transformation, right, son? I nearly choked on my wine. The digital initiative Kevin described over the next 5 minutes was essentially a pale, outdated version of systems I'd helped implement at Horizon 3 years ago. What do you think, Sarah? Mom asked, trying to include me. With your computer experience? Before I could formulate a diplomatic response, Dad waved his hand dismissively. Sarah's in a different world. Consumer apps and websites or whatever. This is industrial engineering, a bit more complex. Actually, I started, I work primarily with industrial applications and… Speaking of work, Dad interrupted, Kevin closed the Westridge contract yesterday. 7 figures. He raised his glass. To my son, proving that the Walsh business instinct runs in the family after all. The table dutifully raised their glasses. Kevin flushed with pride. And Sarah, Dad continued, lowering his glass, still single, still at that startup, still, he paused, searching for the word, waiting for real life to begin, I suppose. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Richard, Mom warned quietly. What? I'm just saying what we're all thinking. 34 years old, no husband, no children, no real career path, playing with computer code while her biological clock ticks away. He turned to me, martini loosened and emboldened by Kevin's success. When are you going to stop disappointing this family and start living up to the Walsh name? The silence that followed was absolute. Even the children sensed the gravity of the moment, their forks suspended in midair. And then the doorbell rang. The doorbell's chime cut through the silence like a lifeline thrown into drowning waters. Mom jumped up, murmuring something about unexpected guests, but Dad waved her back down. I'll get it. Probably those new neighbors I invited. Told them to come by for dessert. He straightened his tie, the perfect host persona sliding back into place as he strode from the dining room. The table erupted in uncomfortable small talk, everyone desperate to paper over the crater Dad's words had left. Aunt Patricia loudly complimented the cranberry sauce. Uncle Frank started a forced conversation about the Patriots season. Kevin studied his plate with sudden fascination. I sat frozen, Dad's words echoing in my head. A disappointment. After everything, the degrees, the career, the success, I was still just a disappointment. I heard the front door open, my father's booming welcome voice, and then another voice that sent ice through my veins. Gabriel Chen, my boss, here now, an hour early. The voices grew louder as they approached the dining room. I gripped my napkin under the table, knuckles white. "Everyone," Dad announced as he re-entered, "we have a surprise guest. This is Gabriel Chen, CEO of Horizon Tech. They're the company I mentioned might be interested in some partnership opportunities with Walsh Engineering." Gabriel stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than Dad's car. His eyes scanned the room and locked onto mine. "There's my star executive. Happy Thanksgiving, Sarah," he exclaimed, genuine warmth in his voice. The room went still. 20 heads swiveled between Gabriel, me, and my father, whose smile had frozen in place. "You know my daughter?" Dad asked, the words coming out stiff. Gabriel laughed. "Know her? Sarah's the reason I'm here. She's the driving force behind Horizon's entire industrial optimization division." He walked over to where I sat, placing a friendly hand on my shoulder. When she pitched the acquisition of Walsh Engineering, she was so passionate about preserving its legacy while bringing it into the modern era. I had to see the company that produced such brilliant talent for myself. I watched the color drain from my father's face as the pieces clicked into place. "Acquisition?" he repeated. Gabriel's smile faltered as he sensed the tension. "Yes, Oh." He looked down at me questioningly. "I thought they knew. The paperwork is ready for Monday." "Monday?" my father echoed, his voice hollow. I stood up slowly, finding strength I didn't know I had. "I was going to tell you after dinner, Dad. Horizon isn't just partnering with Walsh Engineering, they're buying it and implementing my algorithm to save it." "Your algorithm?" Kevin blurted. "Project Phoenix," I said, meeting his confused gaze. "An industrial efficiency system I've spent the last year and a half developing, specifically designed to address the problems Walsh Engineering has been facing." I turned to my father. "The company is failing, Dad. You know it. I found a way to save it, to save the jobs of everyone who works there, to preserve what you built." Dad's face darkened. "By going behind my back? By selling us out?" "By doing exactly what you taught me," I countered, my voice rising. "Finding solutions, being resourceful, building tomorrow today." I gestured to Gabriel. "Horizon is the future of engineering. My algorithm is the future. I tried to give you that future as a gift, but you couldn't even see me long enough to receive it." The dining room had become a theater, with relatives wide-eyed and silent at the unfolding drama. "A gift?" Dad scoffed. "You call a hostile takeover a gift?" "There's nothing hostile about it," Gabriel interjected smoothly. "It's a very generous offer, Mr. Walsh. Your shareholders will be pleased. And the terms stipulate that you remain as chairman emeritus." "A figurehead," Dad said flatly. "In my own company." "In the company you ran into the ground by refusing to innovate," I said, the words escaping like birds too long caged. "The company you would rather see die than admit that your daughter, your disappointment, might know something you don't." Mom gasped. Kevin stood up, starting to say something defensive, but I held up my hand. "I have spent my entire life trying to earn your approval, Dad. My entire life being dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated by you. I built myself into someone successful despite you, not because of you. And even now, even as I throw you a lifeline that will save your legacy, you can only see it as a betrayal." I grabbed my purse from the back of my chair and turned to the table. "I'm sorry for disrupting Thanksgiving. The turkey was delicious, Mom." To Gabriel, I said, "I'll see you at the office on Monday. We can discuss the details then." As I walked toward the door, Dad's voice stopped me. "You walk out that door, Sarah, and you're no longer a Walsh." I turned back one last time, meeting his gaze directly. I stopped being a Walsh the day I realized that name would always be too small to contain who I really am. And with that, I walked out of my childhood home, the autumn air crisp against the tears on my cheeks, feeling both broken and freer than I had ever been. I spent that night in a hotel room, alternating between crying and sending apologetic texts to Mom. By morning, my phone had exploded with messages, some supportive, others accusatory, all of them evidence that the Walsh family would never be the same. Aunt Patricia, always knew you had it in you, girl. Your father needed that wake-up call decades ago. Uncle Frank, harsh but fair, kiddo. Call me when the dust settles. Kevin, how could you ambush Dad like that? This isn't how family acts. Mom's messages were shorter, more careful. He's hurt, not angry. Come home tomorrow? Just you and us? I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I drove to the small park where Dad used to take Kevin fishing, leaving me on the shore to read. I sat on the weathered bench, watching the November sun glint off the half-frozen pond, and wondered how something could feel simultaneously like destruction and liberation. My phone rang. Gabriel. I answered hesitantly. "That was quite a dinner theater last night," he said, his voice gentle with understanding. "Gabriel, I'm so sorry. I never meant for the announcement to happen like that. If you want to reconsider the acquisition—" "Sarah, stop." His tone was firm. "I'm calling because your father showed up at my hotel room at 7 this morning." My heart stuttered. "He what?" "Apparently, after you left, your mother had some choice words for him. Then they stayed up all night going through your old school projects, your awards, articles about you that she'd saved that he'd never bothered to read." Gabriel chuckled. "He had a folder with him, Sarah's accomplishments, your mom had labeled it, thick as a phone book." I couldn't speak, my throat suddenly tight. "He asked a lot of questions about your work at Horizon, technical questions. I showed him the simulation of Project Phoenix on my laptop." Gabriel paused. "Sarah, he cried when he saw what you'd built, said he'd never understood until he saw it visualized, called it beautiful engineering." The tears came again, but different this time. "He also asked if I would delay the announcement, not cancel, delay. He wants to talk to you first, said something about doing it right this time." After hanging up, I sat at that pond for another hour, watching a family of ducks navigate the increasingly icy waters. Then I drove to my parents' house. Dad was waiting on the porch, looking smaller somehow, a cup of coffee cradled in his weathered hands. He stood when I pulled in. We talked for 3 hours. Really talked, maybe for the first time in my adult life. He didn't apologize directly. That's not who Richard Walsh is. But he listened, asked questions about my work, my life, my dreams, showed me the folder Mom had kept, page after page of my achievements that he'd been too blind to see. "I was wrong," he finally said as the afternoon light began to fade. "Not just yesterday, for years. I had this picture in my head of what success looked like, what carrying on the Walsh legacy meant. I couldn't see that you were doing exactly that, just differently." "I never wanted to take the company from you, Dad," I said quietly. "I just wanted to save it, to show you I could." He nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "Your algorithm, Gabriel showed me what it can do. It's revolutionary. Walsh Engineering needs it." He looked at me directly. "Walsh Engineering needs you." The acquisition went through, but with modifications. Dad stayed on as a genuine advisor rather than a figurehead. Kevin found his niche in client relations. I split my time between Horizon and Walsh, implementing Project Phoenix and watching as the company began to transform. The most unexpected outcome came 3 months later, when I received a call from Eliza Montgomery, my childhood best friend, who now worked for the Boston Globe. She'd heard rumors about Project Phoenix and wanted to interview me. "This isn't just a business story," she explained. "It's about women in tech, about generational change in family businesses, about new models of leadership." The article she wrote, "The Algorithm of Reconciliation: How a Daughter's Innovation Saved Her Father's Legacy," went viral in industry circles. I started receiving emails from women engineers worldwide, sharing similar stories of struggle and triumph. Dad framed the article and hung it in the Walsh engineering lobby. Last week, we had another family dinner, the first since Thanksgiving. The dynamic was different. Dad asked me to explain my current project to everyone. Kevin's kids sat beside me, asking questions about coding. Mom beamed from the head of the table, where she now rightfully sat. After dinner, Dad took me to his study and handed me a small box. "This was my father's," he said, as I opened it to find a vintage pocket watch. "He gave it to me when I started the company, said time was the most valuable resource an engineer has." I traced the engraved initials, G.W., my grandfather. "I had something added," Dad said quietly. I turned the watch over. Below my grandfather's initials, freshly engraved, S.W., Sarah Walsh. "You're the future of this family," Dad said, his voice thick. "Of this company. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." The watch now sits on my desk at Walsh Engineering, where I've taken on the role of Chief Innovation Officer while maintaining my position at Horizon. The two companies have become unlikely partners in developing industrial efficiency solutions for struggling American manufacturers. Last month, Kevin's daughter Emily asked if I would teach her to code. "I want to build things like you do, Aunt Sarah," she said, her eyes shining with the same curiosity I'd had at her age. As I set up her first lesson, Dad watched from the doorway, a small smile on his face. "The Walsh legacy continues," he said with pride, "not in spite of who I am, but because of it." The grand gesture, saving the company, had worked, but not in the way I'd expected. It wasn't the algorithm that healed our family. It was the courage to be seen for who I truly am, and my father's belated willingness to look. It's been a year since that Thanksgiving confrontation. The watch on my wrist, my grandfather's watch, keeps perfect time as I navigate between board meetings and coding sessions, between family dinners and industry conferences. Sometimes transformation comes in dramatic moments, a cutting remark over turkey, a revelation that changes everything. But more often, it comes in the quiet aftermath, in the daily choices to see each other differently, to listen more carefully, to value what's unique rather than what's familiar. My father and I still disagree, sometimes passionately, about business strategies and technical approaches. The difference is that now we disagree as equals, as colleagues who respect each other's strengths. The disappointment has transformed into mutual admiration. If you're living in someone else's shadow, fighting to be seen for who you truly are, know this: your value isn't determined by anyone's ability to recognize it. But sometimes, just sometimes, standing firmly in your truth can open eyes that have been closed for too long. This Thanksgiving, we're hosting dinner at my house. Dad's bringing the wine, I'm coding the playlist, and we're both building tomorrow, today. If my story resonated with you, consider subscribing to hear more about navigating family dynamics, professional growth, and finding your authentic path. Leave a comment below sharing your own experience with being underestimated and how you proved them wrong. Remember, sometimes the people who don't believe in you are the ones who need your success the most. This Thanksgiving, we're hosting dinner at my house. Dad's bringing the wine, I'm coding the playlist, and we're both building tomorrow, today. If my story resonated with you, consider subscribing to hear more about navigating family dynamics, professional growth, and finding your authentic path. Leave a comment below, sharing your own experience with being underestimated and how you proved them wrong. Remember, sometimes the people who don't believe in you are the ones who need your success the most.